They thought they could control me, steal my work, and erase my name from everything. But what they didn't know was that their entire empire, the one they were so proud of, I had built it, and all I needed to do was pull out one single brick. The conference room felt suffocating that morning at 9:30 sharp. They'd orchestrated my downfall with surgical precision, expecting tears, pleas, maybe even desperation. Instead, I left them with nothing but a cold smile and two words that would haunt them forever: thank you. They had no idea their $20 million dream was about to become their worst nightmare. My name is Avery Cole, and until 10 minutes ago, I was the lead systems architect at Nova Edge Systems, 32 years old, MIT graduate, the one they called when their precious platforms were bleeding data and hemorrhaging users. I'd saved their asses more times than I could count, pulled all-nighters debugging code that their so-called senior engineers couldn't even comprehend. But none of that mattered now. The conference room on the 40th floor had always felt like a fishbowl, but today it was an execution chamber. Dean Harper sat across from me, his Armani suit perfectly pressed, that practiced smile plastered across his face like a mask. Product director, they called him. I had other words for what he was. Avery, he began, sliding a folder across the mahogany table. This isn't personal, it's just business. I didn't touch the folder. I knew what was inside. Termination papers, a pathetic severance check, and probably some bullshit NDA they expected me to sign without reading. My hands remained folded in my lap, steady despite the rage burning through my veins. The company is restructuring, Dean continued, his voice smooth as poison. Your position has become redundant. Redundant. The word hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. I'd built their entire authentication system from scratch. I'd architected the failover protocols that kept them online during the DDoS attack last Christmas. I'd written the load balancing algorithms that let them scale from 10,000 users to 10 million. Redundant. We control your entire career in this industry. Dean leaned forward, dropping the pretense of civility. Every startup in Silicon Valley will know you were let go for performance issues. Don't even think about fighting this. Performance issues. I almost laughed. Last week, I'd received an email from the CEO himself, praising my work on the new distributed caching system, but I'd also questioned Dean's pet project in front of the board, pointed out the security vulnerabilities that would have cost them millions in GDPR fines. That was my real crime. The HR representative, a nervous woman named Patricia, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. If you'll just sign here, we can make this transition smooth for everyone. I reached for the pen, feeling Dean's satisfaction radiate across the table. He thought he'd won. They all did. As I signed my name with deliberate precision, I finally looked up and met his eyes. Thank you, I said, my voice eerily calm. Dean's smile faltered for just a second. For what? For teaching me that loyalty is a luxury I can no longer afford. I stood, taking the severance check but leaving the NDA unsigned. Patricia started to protest, but I was already walking toward the door. Avery, Dean called out, a hint of uncertainty creeping into his voice. The NDA is mandatory. I paused at the threshold, not bothering to turn around. Sue me. The elevator ride down felt like descending into a new world. 40 floors of my life, compressed into a 60-second drop. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone was already buzzing. My team, former team, had heard the news, but I didn't answer, not yet. Outside, San Francisco's morning fog wrapped around me like a shroud. Nova Edge's glass tower stretched above, disappearing into the mist. They thought they'd destroyed me. They thought removing my name from every commit, every design document, every system I'd built would erase me from their history. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. 2 messages to send before my access was revoked. 2 breadcrumbs that would lead to their downfall. My fingers moved with surgical precision across the screen. They controlled my career. They controlled nothing. They'd simply forgotten one crucial detail. I was the only one who truly understood the monster of complexity I'd created for them. And monsters, well, they tend to turn on their masters when left unfed. The clock on my phone showed 11:45 a.m. In 15 minutes, my credentials would be deactivated. In 15 minutes, I would become a ghost in their system. But ghosts, I'd learned, could be far more dangerous than the living. The walk back to my desk felt like a funeral procession. Colleagues averted their eyes, some out of sympathy, others out of fear, as if my termination was contagious. The open office layout that once buzzed with collaboration now felt like a morgue. Everyone knew, but no one dared speak. My workstation still hummed with life. 3 monitors displaying code I'd never finish, architecture diagrams I'd never implement. A coffee mug with "World's Okayest Engineer" sat cold beside my keyboard, a secret Santa gift from last year. I wouldn't be here for this year's exchange. I had 12 minutes before my access died, 12 minutes to pack 6 years of my life into a cardboard box. But first, 2 critical emails. The first went to legal, my personal attorney. Per our previous discussions regarding intellectual property rights, I'm requesting immediate written confirmation of my ownership rights to the following system modules developed prior to my employment contract revision in January: Authentication Protocol v3.2, Distributed Cache Handler, and the Failover Recovery System. As these were created during my personal time using my own resources, I expect confirmation within 48 hours. The modules themselves were worthless without the proprietary code, but the underlying logic, the architecture patterns, those belonged to me, and Nova Edge's entire infrastructure depended on understanding how they worked together. The second email went to myself, my personal Gmail, no code, nothing that could violate any IP agreements, just a simple system architecture map, drawn in ASCII art like developers did in the old days, boxes and arrows showing data flow, load distribution, dependency chains. To anyone else, it would look like a child's drawing. To me, it was a blueprint of Nova Edge's digital nervous system. And more importantly, it showed every single point of failure. Packing up. I looked up to find Marcus Rodriguez, one of the junior engineers, hovering nervously by my desk. He'd joined 6 months ago, fresh from boot camp, eager and talented. I'd mentored him, stayed late helping him understand the Byzantine complexity of our systems. "Looks that way," I said, carefully placing a potted succulent into the box. He glanced around, then leaned closer, whispering, "This is bullshit. Avery, everyone knows you're the only reason this place stays running." "Not anymore," I replied, disconnecting my personal keyboard. The mechanical keys had clicked through thousands of hours of code. They deserved better than Nova Edge. "What are you going to do?" I smiled, the first genuine expression I'd managed all morning. "Whatever I want, Marcus, for the first time in 6 years, whatever I want." He shifted uncomfortably. "The authentication system. Dean says the offshore team will maintain it now." This time I did laugh, short and bitter. "The offshore team can't even compile it without my build scripts, but that's not my problem anymore." My phone buzzed. 11:58 a.m., 2 minutes left. I opened my terminal one last time, fingers flying across the keyboard. Not to sabotage, that would be beneath me and legally actionable. Instead, I updated one final comment in the main repository. System Architecture, Avery Cole, 2019 to 2024. For those who come after. You're going to need more coffee than you think. Remember, the devil isn't in the details. The devil is the details. Good luck. Commit. Push. 11:59 a.m. I closed my laptop, placed it on the desk. Company property, after all, and picked up my box. Around me, developers pretended to code, but I could feel their eyes tracking my movement. Some of them understood what my departure meant. The smart ones were probably already updating their resumes. As I walked toward the exit, I passed the wall of awards and recognition. My photo was there, from last quarter. Excellence in Innovation, Avery Cole. By tomorrow, it would be gone. They'd erase me from their history like Stalin removing faces from photographs. But you can't erase knowledge. You can't delete understanding. And you certainly can't undo dependencies that run so deep they've become part of your company's DNA. Patricia from HR was waiting by the elevator, presumably to ensure I didn't make a scene. She held out a tablet. "The exit interview survey," she said apologetically, It's required. I took the tablet, checked a few boxes at random, and handed it back. She glanced at it, frowned. You marked excellent for, would you recommend Nova Edge as an employer? Absolutely, I said as the elevator doors opened. Everyone should experience what I have. It's been educational. The doors closed on her confused face. As the elevator descended, my phone buzzed one final time. 12 noon exactly. My Nova Edge email, Slack, GitHub access, all gone. 6 years of my life, severed with the precision of a digital guillotine. But in my personal inbox, 2 confirmations waited. The legal team had received my IP request, and my architecture map was safely stored in the cloud. They thought they'd controlled the narrative. They thought they'd won. They had no idea that I'd just lit a very long fuse. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my home office, a converted bedroom in my Soma loft that had better equipment than most startups. Cole Analytics was officially incorporated. Business cards printed, website live. Funny how quickly you can move when you're not drowning in pointless meetings and corporate bureaucracy. My first client was a small fintech startup that needed help with their database architecture. Clean work, good money, and most importantly, they treated me like the expert I was. No Dean Harper breathing down my neck. No passive-aggressive Slack messages at 11:30 p.m., just problem-solving and respect. I'd established a routine morning coffee at 7 a.m. sharp, code until noon, lunch break to check tech news, afternoon consultations. It was during one of these news breaks that I saw the first signs. TechCrunch. Nova Edge delays product launch for 3rd time this quarter. My coffee mug paused halfway to my lips. Their new AI-powered analytics dashboard, Dean's pet project, was supposed to launch 2 weeks ago. I clicked through to the article. Sources inside Nova Edge confirm that technical difficulties have plagued the release. The company's spokesperson declined to comment on the specific nature of these issues. Technical difficulties. I knew exactly what those were. The analytics dashboard relied heavily on the authentication system I'd built. But authentication wasn't just about passwords and user sessions. I'd woven it through everything. Data validation, API rate limiting, cross-service communication. It was designed to be bulletproof, but only if you understood the intricate handshakes between services. My phone buzzed. Marcus Rodriguez. Hey, Avery. Hope you're doing well. Quick question. Totally hypothetical. If someone needed to modify the ETH token refresh cycle, where would they even start asking for a friend? I smiled and typed back, tell your friend to check the documentation. 3 dots appeared. Then, there is no documentation. That sounds like a Nova Edge problem, not an Avery problem. I set my phone aside, but it kept buzzing. Former colleagues, all with hypothetical questions. The authentication system wasn't failing. It was working exactly as designed, but without understanding the why behind each design decision, any modification would cascade into chaos. 2 days later, another article appeared, this time in the information. Nova Edge engineers struggle with legacy system maintenance. Legacy system. My code was barely 6 months old in some places, but without its creator, it had already become legacy. The article mentioned increased bug reports, customer complaints about slow response times, and this was the best part, a spike in AWS costs because someone had tried to optimize my auto-scaling rules. I pulled up my LinkedIn, 16 connection requests from Nova Edge employees, including 3 from the C-suite. I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on Cole Analytics. Word traveled fast in Silicon Valley, and my client list was growing. A healthcare startup needed help with HIPAA compliance. An e-commerce platform wanted to redesign their checkout flow. Real problems, real solutions, real respect. But the sweetest vindication came from an unexpected source. Thursday afternoon, 2:45 p.m. I was debugging a client's payment gateway when an email arrived from Thomson Reuters. Ms. Cole, we're preparing a piece on technical debt in rapid growth startups. We've heard from multiple sources that you were instrumental in building Nova Edge's infrastructure. Would you be available for comment? I leaned back in my chair, considering the professional thing would be to decline, to take the high road. But then I remembered Dean's words, "We control your entire career." I typed my response. I'd be happy to discuss the importance of documentation, knowledge transfer, and the true cost of treating engineers as replaceable components. I'm available for a call tomorrow at 10 a.m. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at my favorite Thai place. The owner, who knew my order by heart, asked why I looked so happy. "Just watching Karma work in real time," I told her. She laughed. "Karma's always punctual. Sometimes we just don't see the clock." Back home, I opened my laptop to find an interesting email in my personal inbox. It was from a former Nova Edge client, one of their biggest accounts. "Avery, heard you've gone independent. We're experiencing some issues with the Nova Edge platform that their team seems unable to resolve. Would you be available for a consultation? We're prepared to pay emergency rates." Emergency rates, triple my usual fee. I drafted a polite response explaining that while I couldn't work on Nova Edge's proprietary systems, I'd be happy to help them architect an alternative solution, independent, vendor-agnostic, better. As I hit send, my phone lit up with a text from Marcus. "Third all-hands crisis meeting this week. Dean just threw the entire engineering team under the bus. Also, someone found your last commit comment. It's become a meme on our internal Slack." I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my architecture map, the one I'd sent to myself on that last day. All those interconnected systems, all those dependencies I'd built. Nova Edge wasn't falling apart because I'd sabotaged anything. It was falling apart because they'd never valued what I'd built in the first place. They thought they owned it, but they'd never understood it. And in Silicon Valley, understanding was everything. The message came at 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday. Not from Marcus this time, but from Mason Tran, Senior Engineering Director at Vesperon Capital. I knew Mason from conferences, brilliant mind, low tolerance for bullshit. If he was reaching out, something significant was happening. "Avery, need to talk. Off the record. Can you do coffee tomorrow?" Vesperon Capital. They were the lead investor in Nova Edge's upcoming Series C, the ones orchestrating the $20 million IPO everyone had been buzzing about. My pulse quickened. We met at a small cafe in Palo Alto, far from the usual tech crowd haunts. Mason looked tired. Stress lines etched deeper than I remembered. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "We're 3 weeks from due diligence completion," he said, sliding a tablet across the table. "This is Nova Edge's technical assessment. Tell me what you see." I scanned the document, performance metrics, system architecture diagrams, or attempts at them, and a suspicious absence of detailed documentation. But what caught my eye were the gaps. Critical systems were described in vague terms, dependencies were glossed over, and the disaster recovery protocols I'd designed were completely missing. "You built most of this, didn't you?" Mason asked, watching my expression. "I can neither confirm nor deny that," I replied carefully. "But whoever did build it apparently didn't leave much of a paper trail." Mason laughed bitterly. "That's the problem. We've got 3 different engineering teams at Nova Edge, giving us 3 different explanations for how their core systems work. Their CTO just told us everything is auto-magical, his actual word. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was screaming, auto-magical. That's what Dean used to call my systems when he didn't understand them. "Something doesn't add up," Mason continued, lowering his voice. "Their user metrics are stellar, but their AWS bills are through the roof. They claim 99.9% uptime, but I've got sources saying they've had 3 critical failures in the past month, all resolved by mysterious workarounds that no one can explain." "Mysterious workarounds?" I repeated. "Interesting." Mason leaned forward. "Avery, what did you do?" "I did my job," I said simply. "I built robust, complex systems that required deep understanding to maintain and modify. Then they decided they didn't need me anymore. And now they're learning the difference between owning code and understanding it." Mason pulled up another document on his tablet. "This is their IPO prospectus, page 47, risk factors. Notice anything missing?" I read through it. Market risks, competition risks, regulatory risks, but nothing about technical debt or key person dependencies. They'd scrubbed any mention of the engineering challenges they were facing. "They're representing their technical infrastructure as stable and scalable," Mason said. "But my engineers did a code review. They found comments. Avery, your comments, including one that says, 'If you're reading this and I'm not here, check the failover daemon first. You'll thank me later.'" I remembered writing that. It was in the core routing module, the heart of their entire platform. The failover daemon had 17 different configuration parameters that needed to be adjusted in perfect sequence during high-load events. I documented it in my personal notes. "Mason, why are you telling me this?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because Vesperon has $50 million on the line, because I respect engineering excellence and despise corporate politics, and because—" He paused. "I found out what they did to you. Dean Harper bragged about it at an investor dinner. Said they'd optimized their talent pool." Optimized. I'd been optimized out of existence. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Nothing illegal or unethical. I just want to understand what we're really investing in. Our technical audit is next week. Nova Edge claims they can demonstrate full system reliability and maintainability. I have my doubts." I chose my words carefully. Hypothetically, if someone built a system with multiple interconnected dependencies, and if that system relied on undocumented tribal knowledge, and if the person with that knowledge was no longer available, well, demonstrating reliability would be challenging. Mason nodded slowly. "And if during a live demonstration, they encountered edge cases they didn't know existed, then they'd learn what their severance package really cost them." We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, Silicon Valley rushed by, all glass and ambition and carefully crafted narratives. But Mason and I both knew the truth. Beneath every unicorn was code, and code didn't care about corporate politics. "There's something else," Mason said, pulling up his phone. "This was posted on Blind yesterday." It was a screenshot from Nova Edge's internal Slack. Someone had found my last commit comment, the one about needing more coffee. But underneath, someone else had added, "Day 35 without Avery. The coffee isn't helping. Nothing is helping. The machines have turned against us." It had over 200 reactions. "Your name has become legend," Mason said. "The engineers whisper it like a prayer when systems fail. They've started calling inexplicable bugs coal events." Coal events, despite everything. I felt a twist of pride. Mason stood to leave, then turned back. "The technical audit is next Thursday at 2 p.m. Just thought you should know, in case you want to observe from afar." After he left, I sat in the cafe, watching the tech workers hurry past with their branded backpacks and false urgency. Nova Edge had thought they were too big to fail, too smart to need me, but they'd forgotten the first rule of complex systems: respect the complexity, or it will teach you respect. My phone buzzed, an unknown number, but the message was clear. "This is Dean. We need to talk. Name your price." I deleted it without responding. They weren't ready to pay my price. Not yet. The screenshot arrived in my inbox at 6:22 a.m. on Wednesday, the day before the Vesperon audit. Marcus had sent it with just one word: boom. It was from Nova Edge's internal GitHub. Someone had found an old comment I'd left in the authentication module, buried deep in a section of code that handled edge case session conflicts. If you're reading this, either it's me, or it's whoever they'll blame next. The real documentation lives in the architecture, not in words. When this breaks, not if when, remember every system has a heartbeat. You just have to know where to listen. AC, March 2024. Below the comment was a thread of increasingly panicked messages from the engineering team. They'd discovered that the authentication system had been randomly failing for high-value enterprise customers, the ones who paid 7 figures annually. The failures seemed random, but I knew better. They occurred exactly when the session manager tried to reconcile conflicts between the primary and backup authentication servers during peak load transitions. The solution was simple if you understood the heartbeat metaphor. The system needed a 30-second pause between sync cycles during load balancing, not the standard 15 seconds everyone assumed. But that knowledge had lived in my head, not in any documentation. By 9 a.m., My phone was buzzing nonstop. Former colleagues, recruiters who'd heard about the chaos, and 3 more messages from Dean that I didn't bother reading, but one message stood out. From Linda Morrison, Nova Edge's VP of Engineering, someone I'd actually respected. Avery, I know bridges were burned, but we're facing a critical situation. The board is breathing down our necks. Can we have a professional conversation? I called her back. Linda, I said when she picked up, how bad is it? She sighed, and I could picture her rubbing her temples the way she did during crisis meetings. We've lost 3 enterprise clients this week. The authentication failures are cascading into data sync issues. The team found your comment about the heartbeat, but no one understands what it means. Did you try increasing the sync pause duration? I asked innocently. To what we've tried everything from 5 seconds to 2 minutes. Nothing works consistently. 30 seconds, I said. Exactly 30 seconds, not 29, not 31. The system calculates optimal timing based on the Fibonacci sequence I embedded in the load balancer. 30 seconds is the sweet spot for enterprise-level traffic. Silence. Then, Fibonacci sequence. That's not in any of the code reviews. It's in the binary, compiled into the load balancer as a performance optimization. You'd need to decompile it to see it, and even then, you'd need to know what you're looking for. Jesus Christ, Avery, why? Because Dean said my code was too simple, too readable. He wanted innovation. So I gave him innovation, a self-optimizing system that adapts to traffic patterns using mathematical principles. It's brilliant, actually, when you understand it. Linda's voice was strained. The Vesperan audit is tomorrow. If we can't demonstrate system stability, the IPO dies, I finished. Can you help us? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say yes, to swoop in and save the day, but then I remembered the conference room, Dean's smug face, the security escort from the building. I run coal analytics now, I said. My emergency consulting rate is $5,000 per hour, minimum 40 hours, paid up front, and I want a written apology from Dean Harper, publicly posted on the company blog, admitting that I was wrongfully terminated and that the technical infrastructure I built is critical to Nova Edge's success. Linda was quiet for a long moment. The money I can possibly arrange, the apology. Dean would rather watch the company burn. Then he'll get his wish. Avery, please. There are good people here who'll lose their jobs if this IPO fails. She was right, and that did sting. Marcus, the junior developers who'd looked up to me, the QA team who'd actually appreciated my detailed testing protocols, but they'd all stood by while I was thrown away like garbage. Linda, they had good people. They chose Dean Harper's ego over engineering excellence. That's not my problem to solve. I heard her typing, probably messaging the CEO. What if we bring you back full reinstatement, double your previous salary, VP title? With Dean as my peer pass, more typing, then, Avery, I'm going to share something off the record. Dean's on thin ice. If the IPO fails, he's gone. The board is already asking questions about the technical failures. Now that was interesting. How thin? Tissue paper thin. The CEO kept him around because he's good at presentations, but presentations don't fix broken code. I thought about Mason's words, about the audit, about the $50 million at stake. An idea formed, delicious in its simplicity. Linda, I'll give you one piece of free advice. During the Vesperan audit, they'll test your disaster recovery. When they simulate a data center failure, the system will try to fail over to the backup, but it won't work unless someone manually triggers the Byzantine fault tolerance protocol I built. The trigger is hidden in the maintenance console, under legacy operations. The password is devil in the details. One word. Capitalized exactly like that. Why are you telling me this? Because I want tomorrow to be interesting. Either your team figures out the rest of my system in the next 18 hours, or they don't. Either way, Vesperan will see exactly what Nova Edge is really worth without me. I hung up and went back to my client work, but I kept my laptop open to tech news sites. Tomorrow was going to be spectacular, one way or another. That evening, I got one more text from Marcus. The entire engineering team is sleeping in the office tonight. They've ordered 60 pizzas and enough Red Bull to kill a horse. Someone printed your photo and taped it to the wall with "What would Avery do?" written underneath. I'm not sure if it's a shrine or a dartboard. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. They were finally understanding the true cost of treating engineers as replaceable parts. Every line of code has an author. Every system has a soul. And mine had just become their ghost in the machine. Tomorrow, Vesperon would audit Nova Edge, and Nova Edge would learn that owning code and understanding it were two very different things. The call came at 1:30 p.m. on Thursday. Mason Tran. Avery, we need you at the Vesperon offices, now. I don't work for Nova Edge anymore, remember? You're not here for Nova Edge. You're here as an independent technical consultant for Vesperon Capital. 1-hour consultation, $10,000. Our lawyers already drew up the contract. That changed everything. I grabbed my laptop and headed to Sand Hill Road, the heart of venture capital power in Silicon Valley. The Vesperon building was all glass and minimalism, designed to intimidate entrepreneurs into accepting lower valuations. Mason met me in the lobby, along with Vesperon's CEO, David Winters, a legend who'd turned 3 unicorns into IPO gold. Ms. Cole, Winters said, shaking my hand. I've heard interesting things about you. Apparently, you're the ghost haunting Nova Edge's machine. I prefer architect of their success, but ghost works too. We took the elevator to the top floor conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see another room where the Nova Edge team was setting up for their presentation. Dean Harper was there, sweating through his expensive shirt. Linda Morrison looked exhausted. The engineering team resembled zombies who'd lost a fight with caffeine overdose. Here's the situation, Winters said, gesturing for me to sit. Nova Edge claims their systems are stable, scalable, and maintainable. My technical team has doubts, significant doubts. We've brought you in to observe their demonstration and provide your assessment. You want me to verify their claims? I want you to tell us the truth, Winters said. The whole truth. $50 million depends on it. Mason pulled up a screen showing Nova Edge's architecture diagram, or their attempt at one. It was laughably incomplete, missing entire subsystems I'd built. They'll start with a standard demo, Mason explained. Show the platform handling normal load. Then we'll run stress tests, disaster recovery scenarios, and finally, ask them to modify a core system component in real time. Modify a core component. I smiled. Which one? The authentication system. We'll ask them to add multi-factor authentication for enterprise accounts. I nearly laughed. That modification would require changes to 17 different modules, all interconnected in ways that weren't immediately obvious. Without the mental map I carried, it would be like performing surgery in the dark. At 2 p.m. sharp, the demonstration began. We watched on screens in our room while the Nova Edge team presented next door. Dean led off with his usual buzzword bingo. Synergistic platform. AI-driven optimization. Bleeding edge infrastructure. The basic demo went smoothly. Of course it did. I'd built it to be bulletproof under normal conditions. The team visibly relaxed, thinking they were home free. Then Winters pressed an intercom button. Impressive. Now show us disaster recovery. Kill the primary data center. I watched Dean's face pale on the monitor. Linda whispered urgently to the lead engineer, who began typing frantically. They triggered the failover, and for a moment, it looked like it might work. Then the errors began cascading across their monitoring screens. The Byzantine fault tolerance protocol, I said quietly to Mason. They need to trigger it manually. Sure enough, after 3 minutes of panic, someone remembered my hint to Linda. They accessed the legacy operations console, and the failover completed. But it had taken 4 minutes, an eternity in production terms. Interesting, Winters said. Ask them why it's not automatic. Dean's response over the intercom was a masterpiece of corporate speak, using many words to say absolutely nothing. The engineers behind him looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Now for the real test, Winters announced. Please implement multi-factor authentication for your enterprise tier. You have 30 minutes. The Nova Edge room erupted into controlled chaos. I could see them pulling up code, searching through repositories, trying to trace the authentication flow. Someone had printed out my old architecture diagrams, and they were spread across the table like ancient maps to buried treasure. 20 minutes in, they'd managed to break the entire authentication system. The demo environment was throwing 500 errors. Dean had stopped talking entirely, standing frozen like a deer in headlights. Linda took over, her voice steady over the intercom. "We're experiencing some technical difficulties. Our team needs more time to properly implement this feature." "How much more time?" Winters asked. "We'd want to do it right, perhaps a few days." "Ms. Cole?" Winters turned to me. "How long would this modification take if you were implementing it?" I considered. "With full system knowledge, 2 hours. Without it, 2 weeks, minimum, and that's assuming you don't break production in the process." Mason pulled up another screen. "This is interesting. Nova Edge's GitHub shows over 300 commits in the last 72 hours, all attempting to document systems that were built when, over the course of 3 years," I said, "though the core architecture was designed in a 6-month sprint in 2021. And the documentation lived in my head. I tried to document it properly, but Dean always said documentation was a waste of engineering resources. Move fast and break things, he loved to say. "Looks like things are definitely broken now," Winters observed. We watched as the Nova Edge team continued to struggle. They'd found some of my comments, even figured out a few of the connections, but without understanding the underlying philosophy of the system, the mathematical patterns, the rhythm of the failovers, the symphony of services talking to each other, they were just guessing. Finally, mercifully, the 30 minutes ended. The multi-factor authentication was partially implemented, but had broken 3 other features in the process. Winters stood. "Ms. Cole, your assessment." I chose my words carefully. Nova Edge owns some impressive code, but owning code and understanding it are different things. They've got a Formula One race car, but they're trying to drive it with a learner's permit. And their claim of maintainable, scalable infrastructure is technically true. The infrastructure is maintainable and scalable. If you have the knowledge to maintain and scale it, without that knowledge, it's a house of cards in an earthquake zone. Winters nodded, then pressed the intercom one more time. "Thank you for the demonstration. We'll be in touch." Through the glass, I saw Dean's face cycle through confusion, anger, and finally recognition as he spotted me in the adjacent room. Our eyes met across the distance. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just nodded once, professionally. He knew. They all knew. The IPO was dead. Mason walked me out. "That was brutal to watch." "That was inevitable," I corrected. "They made their choice when they decided expertise was expendable. Today was just the bill coming due." As I left the building, my phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "The board wants to talk to you. Tonight, please." I deleted it and kept walking. They weren't ready for that conversation. Not yet. The news broke at 6 a.m. Friday morning. TechCrunch. Nova Edge's $20 IPO withdrawn after failed technical audit. The information. Sources: Vesperon Capital. Pulls out of Nova Edge deal, citing infrastructure concerns. Business Insider. Nova Edge valuation plummets 60% overnight as IPO dreams crumble. I read the articles over my morning coffee, each one painting a grimmer picture than the last. Anonymous sources described the failed demonstration, the authentication meltdown, the 4-minute failover that should have taken 4 seconds. One source, probably Mason, was quoted saying, "The technical infrastructure was a black box. Without the original architect, it was essentially unmaintainable." By 8 a.m., my LinkedIn was exploding. Recruiters who'd ghosted me 6 weeks ago were suddenly very interested in my availability. Former colleagues from other companies reached out with variations of, "Heard about Nova Edge," "Karma's a bitch," "Wanna grab drinks." But the most interesting message came from Marcus. "Emergency all hands at 9. Dean's been suspended. CEO is flying back from Tokyo. Also, 3 senior engineers just quit. Rats, sinking ship, you know the drill." I pulled up Nova Edge's Glassdoor page. New reviews were pouring in. "Technical leadership is clueless. They fired the only person who understood our systems. Management values politics over competence. Avoid at all costs. Great product built on a foundation of sand and arrogance. At 10:15 a.m., Linda called. The board wants Dean gone, effective immediately. Congratulations, I said neutrally. They want you back. Avery, name your terms, CTO position, equity refresh, whatever you want. No, Avery. The company is imploding. Enterprise clients are threatening to leave. The engineering team is in full revolt. We need you. You needed me 6 weeks ago. You chose Dean instead. That was a mistake. That was a choice, I corrected. And choices have consequences. Nova Edge made it clear that I was redundant, replaceable, just another cog in the machine. Now you're learning that some cogs are actually keystones. Remove them, and the whole arch collapses. Linda sighed. The board is prepared to offer you $2 million in equity, vested immediately, plus a formal apology. From Dean. Dean's been escorted from the building. Security found him trying to download the entire codebase onto a personal drive. He's looking at potential criminal charges for attempted IP theft. The irony was delicious. The man who'd erased me from Nova Edge's history was now being erased himself, and far less gently. Linda, listen carefully, I said. Nova Edge is done. Your valuation is destroyed. Your reputation is toxic. And your technical infrastructure is a ticking time bomb that no amount of money can defuse. The smart engineers will leave within the month. The clients will follow. In 6 months, you'll be acquired for parts by someone like Oracle or IBM, who'll gut the company and absorb the IP. You could prevent that. I could have, past tense, but Nova Edge taught me a valuable lesson: never be irreplaceable at a company that considers you replaceable. I hung up and went back to my client work. Cole Analytics had 3 new contracts lined up, all from companies who'd heard about the Nova Edge disaster and suddenly valued documentation and knowledge transfer very highly. At noon, the other shoe dropped. An email blast from Nova Edge's CEO to all clients. Dear valued partners, we are writing to inform you of leadership changes at Nova Edge. Dean Harper is no longer with the company. We are committed to ensuring continuity of service during this transition period. Corporate speak for "we're fucked, please don't leave." My phone rang. David Winters from Vesperon. Ms. Cole, I wanted to thank you for your consultation yesterday. Your insights were invaluable. Just doing my job. Indeed. I'm curious. What would it take to fix Nova Edge's infrastructure? I thought about it. 6 months, a team of 10 engineers, and someone with complete system knowledge leading the effort, plus comprehensive documentation, proper knowledge transfer protocols, and a culture that values engineering over ego. And with you leading it. 3 months, but I'm not interested. What if it wasn't Nova Edge? What if Vesperon acquired the assets and rebuilt from scratch? Now that was interesting. You're going to buy them. For pennies on the dollar, yes, their technology has value, just not in its current state. We'd need someone who understands it to extract that value. And you want me to be that someone? I want you to name your price, equity, salary, control, everything's negotiable. I looked out my window at the San Francisco skyline, all those towers full of startups making the same mistakes Nova Edge had made, treating engineers like interchangeable parts, valuing presentations over competence, building empires on foundations they didn't understand. Mr. Winters, I appreciate the offer, but I'm done building kingdoms for other people. Cole Analytics is my focus now. Consulting forever. You're too talented for that. Not forever, but for now. I'm enjoying being the one in control, the one who decides which clients deserve my expertise and which don't, the one who can walk away without losing everything I've built. He chuckled. The ghost becomes the architect of her own destiny. Something like that. After we hung up, I pulled up the Nova Edge website, their careers page, which had once boasted about their selective hiring process and top-tier engineering culture, now had 17 open positions, all marked urgent. Marcus texted me a photo from inside the office. Someone had printed out a banner and hung it in the engineering area. The devil is in the details, AC. Below it, someone had added, and we sold our soul for a quick IPO. I closed my laptop and stood up, stretching. Outside, San Francisco hummed with ambition and appetite. Somewhere in those towers, other Dean Harpers were making the same calculated cruelties. Other companies were sacrificing excellence for expedience. But I was free from their politics, their posturing, their profound misunderstanding of value. I'd built Nova Edge's digital empire, and I'd watched it crumble without lifting a finger to destroy it. The ultimate revenge wasn't sabotage, it was absence. It was the elegant proof that I had never been redundant. I had been essential. And now, finally, they knew it too. 6 months later, I was sitting at the same small cafe where Mason and I had met, but this time I wasn't alone. Across from me sat 3 former Nova Edge engineers, brilliant minds who'd escaped the sinking ship and started their own venture. They wanted Cole Analytics to design their infrastructure from the ground up. "We learned from Nova Edge's mistakes," one of them said. "Documentation first, ego never." I smiled, sipping my cortado. Through the window, I could see the old Nova Edge building. The logo had been removed last month when Oracle completed the acquisition for $3 million. A company once valued at $200 million, sold for scrap. Dean Harper had tried to start his own consulting firm. Last I heard, he was struggling to find clients. Turns out, when you're known as the man who destroyed a $20 million IPO through sheer arrogance, people aren't eager to hire you. Linda Morrison had landed well. Taking a VP engineering role at a legitimate startup, she'd called me once to apologize, really apologize, for not standing up when it mattered. I accepted it. We all make choices we regret. Marcus still texted me occasionally. He'd joined Google, where they actually valued documentation and knowledge transfer. His last message included a photo of his new desk, where he'd framed my famous comment, "The devil is in the details." But the best part came in an email from David Winters at Vesperon Capital. "Avery, thought you'd appreciate this. We've just published our annual investor report, including a case study on due diligence in tech acquisitions. Nova Edge is featured prominently, anonymized, of course, as an example of what we call technical debt syndrome. The key lesson: never underestimate the value of individual expertise, and never assume that code ownership equals code comprehension. P.S. Our portfolio companies now require comprehensive documentation and knowledge transfer protocols. We're calling them Cole standards. Your revenge has become industry best practice." Best, David. Cole standards. My name had become a verb, a warning, a reminder that engineers aren't replaceable parts in a machine. We're the architects of digital worlds, and when you discard us like obsolete hardware, you learn that some deletions can't be undone. I opened my laptop to check Cole Analytics' dashboard. 15 active clients, all paying premium rates for the expertise and respect Nova Edge had thrown away. My calendar was booked solid for the next 3 months, but I kept Fridays free. Those were my days. For learning new technologies, for mentoring junior developers who reached out, for remembering that success isn't about controlling others, but about controlling your own destiny. The cafe's sound system was playing some generic techno, but in my mind, I heard something different. The hum of servers, the click of keyboards, the rhythm of systems I'd built and walked away from. Nova Edge thought they owned that symphony, but they'd never understood that ownership without understanding is just expensive noise. My phone buzzed with a notification. TechCrunch had published a retrospective, "The Nova Edge Collapse a Year Later, Lessons Learned." The article featured quotes from unnamed engineers, investors, and one particularly telling line: the company learned too late that their most critical system wasn't technological, it was human. I closed the article and looked at my reflection in the laptop screen. No longer the exhausted engineer working 16-hour days for people who didn't value her. Now I was Avery Cole, founder of Cole Analytics, creator of Cole Standards, the woman who brought down a $20 million IPO without writing a single line of malicious code. They'd tried to erase me from their history. Instead, I became their cautionary tale. They'd said I was redundant. I proved I was irreplaceable. They'd thought they controlled my career, but in the end, I controlled their destiny. The ultimate revenge wasn't destroying what I'd built. It was letting them discover they couldn't maintain it without me. Every failed deployment, every system crash, every frustrated engineer staring at my cryptic comments, they all whispered the same truth. You should have valued her when you had her. I finished my coffee and packed up my laptop. Another client meeting in an hour. Another company eager to avoid becoming the next Nova Edge. As I walked out into the San Francisco afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in those final months at Nova Edge: peace. Not the peace of forgiveness. Some bridges deserve to stay burned. But the peace of vindication, of knowing that the best revenge is a life well lived, a career self-directed, and a legacy that teaches others the true cost of arrogance. They'd controlled my team. Their $20 million IPO got canceled. And I didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. I just had to be irreplaceable, and then replace myself with nothing. Sometimes, the most elegant code is the code you never write. And sometimes, the most devastating revenge is simply walking away and letting gravity do the rest. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of corporate karma resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts or similar experiences in the comments. Have you ever witnessed technical expertise being undervalued or seen a company learn the hard way that some people truly are irreplaceable? Let's discuss. And remember, always document your code. You never know when it might become someone else's mystery to solve.